It is August 13th, 2015, Thursday afternoon. 413 at Susquenita High School, located at this point in time at 309 Schoolhouse Road. And I'm here today talking with Harriet Magee. Harriet is sometimes referred to as Miss Susquenita. Class of 2015 this year referred to her as the Susquenita Lady. And she was asked to come back and speak at baccalaureate this year to them. But we're here today to talk a little bit about the history of Susquenita High School for people in the future who might be interested in it. So tell me, Harriet, the school district was not always here. What was done the Cannon and Marysville areas? What kind of schooling did they have before Susquenita? And why did Susquenita come into being?
Okay. Well, Duncannon had their high school, and the first high school they had was where the Presbyterian parking lot is today. And in fact, my mother had graduated there in 1924, and then I was in the first class that graduated from Susquenita High School in 1955. But Duncannon had their high school, and they had the second floor of the high school was the high school's classes. First floor was third grade through sixth grade. Then there was a little white schoolhouse right next door to it that had first and second grade. The Marysville students had the high school up at Sylvan Street, and that's where their gymnasium and all the senior high facilities were. And then you had one on Chestnut Street, the Chestnut Street School, which is also referred to as the Bell Tower downtown. And that was where your grade school was.
Okay. So originally there were separate schools for Marysville and Duncannon, but at some point they came together to form Susquenita. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, well, first of all, Duncannon and Susquenita had a great rivalry. And we know that when this was in the writing to begin a jointure, it was common to have these joints at that time. We had a Duncannon joint and a Marysville joint. And that was really the class of 1952 that experienced the actual joint terminology on their diploma. In 1953, of course, it was in the works during 1952. That was the very end of L.W. Bell's tenure in Duncannon. He came in 1922 and terminated in 1952. He was the grandfather of it all. And his wife, I think, operated the school just as efficiently as he did. In fact, I think she was in charge of him. But in 1952 was the last time that Duncannon and Marysville actually had Duncannon and Marysville on the diploma. And then in 1953, we had the beginning of Susquenita on the diplomas. However, it was in the works for about a year and a half before that. The school board, and they had some rivalry as well when they sat at the meetings. But anyway, we did have about 18 months worth of work before we became Susquenita.
What made them decide to come together?
Well, I guess it was in vogue. It was what was going on around the country, that you should have a larger facility, and so that everybody had equal square in what they were getting, that if they would have more money to pull from, the economics would be better, and therefore they would have better supplies. They'd have laboratory facilities, dealing with the sciences, for instance, and also with the shop students as well. And it was something. It was all exciting to change their minds and think that they were doing the best thing they could for education at the time.
Okay. So the two schools came together. Were they in the same building immediately, or?
No, when the two schools came together, we still resided in our own hometowns and continued in the same facilities. It wasn't until the last day of January of 1955 that we actually physically came together in this building. And that was an exciting day because we had, again, rivalries with the students. However, the students were wonderful. They were very copacetic with what was going on. And we were anxious to meet new friends. Now, however, I had the advantage of being in basketball, so therefore the girls would go to Marysville to practice and to play their games. However, the boys also played in Marysville, but not practice. They practiced in Duncannon, but they played their varsity game in Marysville. The girls would play first, and then the boys played second.
So when this, before January 31st, 55, the students were still going to separate buildings, Duncan and Marysville,
Yes.
but they were Susquenita High School.
Oh, yes, they
Okay.
were Susquenita 2 years prior to them coming into the
building.
same facility.
Now, on January 31st, 1955, you were here that day as a student, right?
Oh, yes, I was.
Tell me what your feelings were. Do you remember?
Well, it was great. It was exciting because we were anxious to meet one another, and some of us knew one another because of the athletics before, because we had 2 years of being together that way. But it was exciting. We were very happy about it, and there was no difficulty at all among the students. However, teachers were a different story.
Tell us about that.
Well, teachers had a great rivalry. Now, I had a very good friend who became my very good friend, that was on the faculty from Duncan. Her name was Dorothy Hamilton Mitchell. And Dorothy Hamilton Mitchell, plus Ethel Taylor, who taught the Latin and English and math also, they were two individuals who told me a lot later on. They said it was very difficult for them. In fact, they would not go even to the faculty lounge. They would have their lunch elsewhere, somewhere in the building where there was sanity time, because they would say that the faculty was very, very rigid, and they were very much in rivalry.
Tell us about the nickname Blackhawks. Where did that come from? Were there other names considered? How did that happen?
There was a committee of 5 back in 1954. This was in February of 54. And I don't recall all the people that were on that, but I know there was a teacher, there was an administrator, and then 3 students. One of the students was my husband, Charles Magee. And he was president of our class anyway. He was the one that kind of, the real politician of the class.
He was to become your husband. He was not your husband at the time.
No, he was not my husband at the time. However, we married later, but we didn't marry until we were 26 years old.
Okay.
I had too many fish to fry, and I knew that if I married early, I would be in the divorce court. So therefore, we waited it out till we were 26, and because I had really had a lot I wanted to accomplish. But anyway, the meeting, I was not present at the meeting, but I learned from Charles what had happened, and he was the one that suggested the Black Hawk. But they thought that was kind of crazy. And Charles said, I realize it was kind of crazy because there really isn't a Black Hawk. If you go into biology, you know that there's not a Black Hawk. But it was kind of appropriate, and it sort of stuck, and they liked it. So as a result, we became the Blackhawks.
Wow, that's something else. Tell me about the alma mater. I know there was an alma mater composed of that.
The alma mater was actually written in '53. Ruth Lewis, the 6th grade teacher at Duncan, wrote the words to the alma mater. R. Nelson Cost was a music teacher at Duncan, and he wrote the music. And it's the same one that we have today.
So you graduated from here. What date did you graduate?
I graduated with my class on May 28th, 1955. And it was the first time that the auditorium was ever used. It was just finished 3 days before we got in there.
Wow. The same auditorium that we have today.
Yes, I mean, it's a little bit changed in its decor.
Yes, it has changed over the years.
But when we came down here, we had no cafeteria, no gymnasium, no auditorium, no shops or anything like that. But it was all right. We brown bagged our lunch and we enjoyed. We ate in the lobby. Different shifts would eat in the lobby with our brown bags.
Oh,
And it was fun. It was fellowship.
mm-hmm. So you graduated, and I know you came back here, and we're going to get to that, but tell us about the intervening years. When you left Susquenita as a student, where did you go? Because you have a very interesting life. Where did you go after that?
Well, my brother was much older than I, and he's the one that he had just received his doctor's degree from Temple. And he began these community colleges. And that was his dissertation, the community college. But he wrote that dissertation back in '53, and it certainly took on. And I know Dr. Gladfeller from Temple came up here with him, and they were looking at what could be done in Harrisburg and all this stuff. And I realized that I needed to go to college. But I thought, oh, do I want 4 years? I'm going into nursing. It'll be 3 years instead of 4. That wasn't very fine thinking. So I went into nursing, finished my 3 years, and I needed more. Then I realized, hey, I got the bug, I'm ready to go. So I went to Lebanon Valley, and I got a bachelor's degree in nursing and a bachelor's in biology. Then after that, I went to Temple, and I was back and forth to the Temple. In fact, Shirley Crumley, who was one of my good friends who was on the school board here at one time, we would travel back and forth to Penn and to Temple to get our graduate work done. We did get a few classes in Harrisburg, but very few. We had Saturdays were our big days to go to Philadelphia. And then I was down there a full semester, and of course that was the flower children time. And we had to have bodyguards wherever we went. It was very difficult in Philadelphia. People say it's difficult today. Well, they don't have anything on what we experienced. But anyway, then I got a master's in science and education and a master's in nursing.
Okay.
So that's my background, and I like so many things. I'm not going to live long enough to learn it all, but and history I love as well. So
You were part of history at one point. You were over in Southeast Asia, correct?
yes, when I was an instructor in nursing at Polyclinic, I happened to have 3 students in the emergency room at the time, instructing them and going through the proper procedures that were located there. And a good friend of mine who was a neurosurgeon, his name was Dr. Silvernail, who was also flight surgeon in the South Pacific. And he was really, what would you call a National Guard down at Middletown, but it was the Olmsted Air Force Base at that time. And he came to me and he said, I have 3 nurses in the National Guard, and that's it. And one of them is your good friend, Connie Ungst, who was in the operating room with me. And I said, yes. I said, I'm aware of that. And he said, we need 3 more nurses to go. He said, we need to go down to Vietnam. I have another tour of duty to go down to bring home head injuries to the States, and we would be bringing them into Andrews Air Force Base, and then to Bethesda and to Walter Reed. So I thought probably about a half a second, and I said, I will certainly go with you. So 6 nurses and Dr. Silverman, we went. In the belly of a C-5, across that Pacific, and that Pacific is wide. I thought the Atlantic was wide enough. Well, the Pacific, you thought you weren't getting there. We put down in Guam, and we weren't authorized personnel, so we couldn't get off the plane. So we waited our turn to get off then down in Vietnam to bring the head injuries on. We had 74 head injuries. And one thing that was so great was that we didn't lose anybody on the way back. They all survived, and I don't know the statistics after we discharged them to Walter Reed and to Bethesda. But there were many, many, many vehicles there to take them to their destination, and then we puddle jumped up to Harrisburg in a smaller plane, and we were discharged then.
How traumatic was that for you?
Very difficult. I only talked about that within the last 5 years. That was much to behold. I understand the little bit that I was exposed to why the servicemen don't talk very much when they come back. Especially my 7 of my relatives that were in the Second World War. Not a word out of it. They couldn't. Very difficult.
Now, when did you return to Susquenita?
Well, I'll tell you. I was at the college, Lebanon Valley and Polyclinic, a combination. And when I was in the one lab, the micro lab at Poly, I got a call transferred to me from our principal here at the time, who was Bill Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill was a good friend of mine, and he was having his problems here. And he said, Harriet, he said, I wish you'd come back home. He said, come back, you'll be with your own children, your own family. And he said, I need you. And I said, well, what do you need? He said, well, first of all, he said, I need a coordinator of health. I need a school nurse. And he said, right now, the state is on our back about this human sexuality, and it has to be taught in the classroom. I don't have anybody certified. If you'd come back, my problems would be solved. And he said, furthermore, he said, the school board is going to hire an outside agency to do this, and the parents are on my doorstep. They don't want an agency in here. So he said, my life's a nightmare. He said, would you consider coming back? He called me, that was the 15th of May. I was not excited at all. I was so used to the college age, I was so used to research, and I thought, why do I want to come to the high school level? Well, I wasn't anxious about it. And I didn't say I would come until August. I had to think about this. And every once in a while, the family, we would talk about it at the supper table usually. And it was usually the same old thing. The issue was tabled. And finally, then, one night when we were discussing this, and of course my sons were all excited, Mom's going to be home, and my husband as well. But a call came, and it was Jack, my brother. And he said, oh, he said, your voice doesn't sound right. What's the matter up there? And then I told him. I said, well, we're discussing something that I haven't shared with you yet either. So then I told him of my opportunity. And he said, that's what you need to do. He said, you need to be at home. And he said, furthermore, you'll have better retirement if you go into public education. So that kind of did it, and I said, okay. The second week after I was here on duty at Susquenita, Bill Smith came rushing into my office and saying, we didn't fill out an application. This is public school. He said, you've got to have an application in this registered in my filing cabinet. And he said, fill it out now so I get it in so my duff is covered. So I said, okay, so we did it then.
What year was this now?
That was in September of '78.
Okay.
So that's how I got here.
Okay.
Reluctantly, but I'm very happy that I came. I made a lot of new friends, and and the students were fantastic. Now I had a great deal of adjustment to the 8th grade level.
Mm.
That's the hormone problem, and I did have to adjust to them and their behavior, but I didn't maybe fully adjust, but I operated well with them.
Because the school was 7th through 12th back then.
Yes, and both 7 and, well, it changed frequently. Sometimes you had 7 through 12, sometimes you had 8 through 12.
Right.
It changed depending upon the population of the community,
Right.
you know. But the 8th grade was my difficult ones, but however, they became just excellent for me.
Okay. Now, so you were the nurse here, but after a while you wore some different hats here too as well, right? What did you do?
In '86, that's when they wanted the gifted program stated. Again, the state was on their tail.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get this done. So Jim Warnock, and I'm trying to think who else was on board at that time. He was the one that really came to my rescue here in the office. He said, we want to talk to you. And he said, come over to Ray's office. I said, now what's up? He said, well, we need a gifted department. And he said, you have so much in your background. I have an English minor and have a bio major, and and I have a chem minor, and all this stuff. And in fact, when Bill sent my credentials to the state to get my credits, it came back biology, general science. I even had physics for 6 years without taking a course. I had chemistry for 12 years without taking a course. But they didn't have nursing on there, and that's what we sent it in for. So he said, I'll take care of that. So it wasn't long till I did the nursing registry. But because of all the background, the very mixed up background that I had, that was why they thought that I should begin a gifted program. Because the students were in there anyway doing science projects and asking me all these things, and I'd find research for them and give them samples of things. And in fact, there were many times I had the students up in my family room in the basement, the rec room, doing projects. I can still see Jason Strayer and Ned Little in one corner, and of course my 2 sons and whoever else was needing help. They were in the house, and we were getting ready for science fair. But anyway, they asked me if I would consider taking the gifted. And in '86, I had the gifted as well as the nursing responsibility. So the rooms in that nursing office were used for many, many things.
Tell us about some of the things you did in the gifted program with the students.
Oh my. We had, I had the students take one of our, what we call Oxford Club courses. Some even took 2. They also had to have a minimum of 3 activities in order to provide for their IEP. And we just had so much going on. The first thing that I wanted to do was to really have a great trip for the students. And 35 of us went to the Soviet Union back in '89 before they became Russia. and it was very different. It was very scary. It was an experience and a half. Our rooms were bugged, and we certainly could not talk about things. We had a KGB agent that had to usher us off the plane, and she did. Her name was Luba Korinsky, very much involved with the KGB. And however, the last day we were there, she did take us to a place in Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg again, and gave us the opportunity to actually bargain on the black market. And our students, my students, actually came back with probably just the clothes on their back. They gave everything away, and for the exchange of some pins that they would give them in Russia. It was incredible. And of course, I had the junior engineering technology students, and we did a lot of experimentation.
It was called JETS.
Yes, the JET, and I enjoyed doing that, and we spent not only days doing this, but nights as well, Saturdays and Sundays, and it was a long haul. And we would do this in actual competition with the National Science Organization out of Princeton, and we would get into these large competitions, and it would take many days to get something to work. I remember one day Jessica Stoner coming into my office and throwing her car keys down on my desk, and she said, "Mrs. Magee, it's a miracle. It's an absolute miracle." I said, "What's a miracle, Jessica?" I went out and turned this key in my ignition, and it worked. I have now learned that I can respect these things that work. After we try something maybe 10, 12 times and it doesn't work, now I can appreciate science, because there were many days that things just don't work.
Is there any one project that you did with JETS that stands out in your mind?
Oh, there were many of them. I think maybe the page turner was one.
Tell us about
The page turner was one of the first. We had to take a handicap and allow them to have pages in books of all varieties turned so that they could read. We had to do it 3 ways. We had to have the joystick, which would allow to manipulate the turns of the pages. We had an old piece of a curtain rod that we used, because we couldn't spend more than $200 on these projects. And we had a curtain rod, a flat metal curtain rod, that when we would push a button, the curtain rod would go across and turn the page. And the third thing was a baseball cap. We used the Susquenita baseball cap with a dial at the top, that all that the person had to do was tilt their head and the page would turn. And so there was all kinds of things that we did, and we hooked it up to the computer as well to make it work as well. So it was exciting to do this stuff, and the students really learned. We learned to appreciate science. We learned to have patience. When something worked, it was a joyous occasion. Incredible. And we had a lot of things that we did a lot of things in our department. Archaeological digs. I would send them to Baltimore, and with Johns Hopkins, and they would be digging up areas where there were old privies. That's where you found the good stuff, and that's where. Denise Wilt was one of them that just loved it down there, and in fact, she went down following in the summer. When we got back from the Soviet Union, well, first of all, before we went to the Soviet Union, I had the students have at least one semester of the Slavic language, the Russian language, and we went down. I took the whole group, 35. We went down to Hack the one night, and a woman by the name of Nora Schwartzman was our professor, and she defected back in '78 from the Soviet Union. She was a concert pianist and a chemical engineer, but she was teaching the language at Hack, and in her teaching, she noticed all these kids that I had in the class, and she came back to me, and she looked at me, and she says, "Harriet, Harriet." That's what she always called me. She said, "I'll come to you. You stay home. I'll come to you." So she then, 2 times a week, she'd journey to Susquenita, and we'd have class here for the Slavic language. So it was really interesting. And I'll tell you, some of our students really could do well with 1 semester. In fact, when we got on an airplane, a domestic airplane, in Moskva, which was Moscow, to go south to the Black Sea, he was so fascinated with these students, and he could speak smidgens of English, but he was so interested. He wanted to meet the students.
Mm-hmm.
So I immediately called 3 of my people that can speak a little bit of that language, and they introduced every student on that flight. And one was Morel Robb was one of them that did that. The DeHaas girl was another one, and Lori Moore was the third one. And when we came back from the Soviet Union, I had the 3 enrolled as sophomores at Dickinson College to take Russian.
So you went to Russia. What are some of the other places you went to on trips?
Oh my. Well, we did the United Kingdom, Ireland, Scotland, England, Wales. We did, let's see, we did Paris and the Alps. We went to Austria and Switzerland. We went to southern Germany, Bavaria, Munich. We went to Greece, Italy and Greece. We have had explorations, and also Scandinavia. We did.
What are other things you remember about your time as a staff member here at Susquenita?
Well, it was nice to work particularly with the science department and the history department. And even Laura Messner and I got together very closely because of her interest in local history. And I would work well with her. In fact, this past weekend I worked well with her. We were sharing a lot of things, and she brought things in for our 150th birthday of Duncannon. And we were still sharing history. And but the science department, and of course I got along with the math department well, but my sons always told me, Mom, just don't help students with math. You do it the long way, and they're going to be confused. I remember one day, I told students this. I said, I can't help you with math, but I'll get you to the right person. It was usually Amy Landers. And, but nevertheless, they were so interested in how I did my math. One day, Tony Rizzo came in at lunchtime, and he said, I have a problem for you to do. Do it on the board. I want to know how you do this math. So I'm starting on the board, and I have got all this stuff written. But anyhow, I had this on the board. And a couple other students came in, and Tony said, just sit down, but don't look at the board. Don't look at the board. This is really nonsense. He said, I don't know how they did their math. I said, well, I'm still using a slide rule. So I said, I did go back to an abacus, but I'm still can use a slide rule. So, but we had a lot of intervention and work with the students.
You mentioned your own sons. Tell us a little bit.
Well, Todd, our older one, had graduated here. And he vacillated where he was going to go to school.
What year did he graduate?
He graduated here in 84. I had to think. In 84. He was born in 66.
Right.
So he had applied to 3 schools, Bucknell, Cornell, and Lehigh. And he really vacillated to where he wasn't one that talked a lot. He kept things to himself. And he still does. But he got his first response back from Bucknell, and I didn't even know he got it. I saw it on his desk at home. Didn't say anything about it. And then he got his Lehigh one. He told me about it at home, but didn't say much about it. That went on the desk. Then the Cornell one came. He actually brought that down from the mail to my office and showed it to me, so I figured this must be more important. Well, time went on. He kept thinking I should go to Lehigh because I'm just from a small school like Susquenita, and I shouldn't put myself out there in an Ivy League school. Then the next breath, no, I'm going to go to Cornell. And this went back and forth. In fact, I went to an Eastern Star meeting the night before he had to make his decision, and all the papers were laid out to go to Lehigh. When I came back, it was just the opposite. That next morning, Todd said to me, Mom, would you care if I'd go to Cornell? I said, absolutely not, wherever you want to go. And he was very fortunate to have a perfect on SAT. Anyway, he went to Cornell and did very well. Very well. He had a 3.9 when he graduated. And he was in engineering physics, which is one of the toughest curricula up there. A small school like this did produce somebody. Now Ross, who was the home buddy, became a mechanical engineer and went to Bucknell. And he now is the supervisor of operations at Berrier Island for the power plant. And Todd, the older one, is a researcher for PPG, Pittsburgh Plate Glass.
Well, I know over the years that we've had many outstanding students at Susquenita. Would you care to mention some at this point and what happened to them after they left Susquenita and how they succeeded?
Well, we've had a lot of them in research like you wouldn't believe. We have several with doctor's degrees, both physicians and the PhDs.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my goodness, I'm on the spot here, but there's so many of them. Morel Robb, who's now a lawyer. I mean, she's a lawyer for the Chesapeake Bay Commission. And then Jessica Stoner, who had double majored in Japanese and biochem at the University of Pennsylvania, and she became cherry blossom queen in Washington because she was a year in Japan studying. And then I have Mike Danko with the CIA. I have the DeHaas girl with Deanna is with the FBI.
Right.
FBI. And
now, thinking back over the last 60 years, how is Susquenita changed? How's it stayed the same?
well, as far as the physical structure, it has become more beautiful. The design, walking down the hallways, it's very impressive. It really is. And I ought to back up to our Tony Rizzo. He's an advisor to 3 generals at the Pentagon. Oh, I could come up with a whole lot of them, but it's going to take a lot, and there's just so many of them that you just wouldn't believe, what they've done.
But you say the campus has become more beautiful over the years.
Yes, it has, and I'm really pleased. I had the opportunity to be in here in different classes this past year. One on existentialism, one on transcendentalism, one in the art department on history, and the students were so polite. They were so very nice. And then you had me in here to the day that would be the anniversary of us
The 60th
coming
anniversary.
into the new building here at Susquenita. They were also courteous, so very courteous.
And I don't know that I told you that night there was a basketball game, and spontaneously the students broke out and sang "Happy Birthday" to Susquenita before we started.
That's really neat. That was really nice. And I had the privilege of scoring 1,000 points in basketball here at Susquenita.
I understand that you are on a championship team.
However, poor J.E. and I looked for evidence. In those days, they didn't care too much about the girls, you see. And with the coming from, with all the school changes, we couldn't find records.
So the school's changed a lot over 60 years.
Oh, yes, yes. And I'm pleased with academics, and I just, we can play ball with the best of them. We really can, and I've experienced it. I have all the Ivy Leagues covered except Brown,
Okay.
and I've sent them to all of them, and they've done very, very well.
I think we covered Brown after you.
Okay, I'm
We
glad
were
that
all
now
covered.
they're all covered. I've covered Cornell 6 times, I know, with the students, and the Dyer boy went to Cornell as well,
Mm-hmm.
and Tony went to Cornell. It's wonderful,
Right.
and what they're doing is incredible.
Now, we don't know how many years in the future people will be watching this, but for Susquenita students in the future, what would you have to say about their past, their history, what they have to be proud of, what they have to live up to?
Well, there's an awful lot of people that have come out of this area that people don't know about, such as we had a man by the name of William Fitzpatrick, who went to Curtis Institute. He wrote 84 of our hymns, of which we know many of them, like "Lead Me to Calvary," "'Tis So Sweet to Trust in Jesus." He also wrote "Away in a Manger." We also had a fantastic theater arts female by the name of Maria Doro. Her right name was Maria Catherine Stewart, and she was a silent screen actress. She was the first female American actress to have a command performance in front of Queen Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
She's here. She lived here. We have so many military mites here. General Bowdoin, John Bowdoin, general in the War of 1812. We have General Frederick Watts, the general in the Revolutionary War. We had Sam McKenzie and Sam Roller that were in the Mexican War. And what did they do but capture flags? One at the Battle of Chapultepec and one at the Battle of Mexico City. They're now down in the archives at our state capitol. I could go on and on and on with people that have done so much. Joseph Hawley, who came from Duncannon, Ireland, who actually named the town Duncannon. And he was quite a businessman. He was so full of knowledge, but he treated it with wisdom and gave much guidance to our whole area here. And when you think of how the area grew up with the canals and the ferries and the stagecoaches, and oh my goodness. And Charles Dickens made his presence known here too. He was in this area.
Wow.
He was a little unhappy in Harrisburg because they lost some of his paraphernalia when he was coming on the canals. But it took 3 days to go from Harrisburg to Duncannon at that time, so he cooled down a bit.
Okay. Any last words?
Oh my. Just want to make sure the institution thrives for a long time. And they have gotten better in many ways. I wish maybe a little bit of our athletics would improve a bit, but we have had successes. We have had successes.
With Jason Sloan.
And really let Penn State
I knew Jason very well, and I still do know Jason. Yeah, we had a lot of them. Joe Crockett, fantastic quarterback.
Right.
Yes, we've had them here, and even Randy. I was thinking of Randy Morrison. Randy did well as quarterback as well. We had good running backs. We really did. We had some good linebackers.
And I don't want to forget some of our girl athletes, minor boys. A little bit after you left, we had Sherry Micus, who played professional basketball in Europe. Heather Conroy, two-time All-American field hockey at Penn State. So we've had some great athletes over the years as well.
And don't forget Julie Foose and Lindsay McCormick at Lebanon Valley. They were in scholarships in field hockey. They were my kids too.
Yeah.
You know, we balanced our act. We tried to have athletics with the academics.
Good job.
Yes, the John Travers Award, given annually to the senior in the Harrisburg area who is the best at academics and athletics. We have had 3 winners over the years.
Well, we want to thank you for joining us this afternoon, wherever you're at and whenever you're at. Last words I have for all of you is remember, Hawks soar. See you later.